If you're a woman over 60 who has lived alone long enough, there is a very quiet moment no one teaches you to recognize. That's the moment you suddenly realize you are no longer willing to trade your peace, your home, and the money you've worked your whole life to save, just to be able to say, I have a man. This video is not about saying men are bad. It is about 3 inner shifts that happen when you've lived alone long enough to the point where you refuse to go back to the role of nurse with a purse and will only accept a relationship if it passes the filter of peace, safety, and dignity. If you've stayed in relationships that took more than they gave, and now you want to understand why you simply cannot go back to that way of living, stay until the end. This is a class only women who have been alone long enough ever get to attend. The first thing that changes when a woman has lived alone long enough is where she places men in the picture of her life. When you were younger, or in the early years of marriage, you were taught in very subtle ways that men are like oxygen. Without him, you are not complete. Without him, you are not secure. Without him, your life is missing a key puzzle piece someone has to come and fill. Then, for one reason or another, divorce, widowhood, a breakup, or simply being done with compromising, you start living alone. At first, there is fear. Fear of the quiet house. Fear of going a whole day without a text. Fear of not knowing who to talk to at night besides yourself. But strangely, after enough time that silence begins to teach you things no one ever taught you before, you realize there is no one slamming doors, no heavy silence of the silent treatment in your living room. No one is throwing their mood into the kitchen with one curt sentence and then shutting down. No one is wrecking the rhythm of your days just because they're angry, bored, drunk, or feel entitled. And slowly something very simple happens. Your body comes down. Your shoulders drop. You sleep deeper. Simple meals digest better. You start to feel a kind of peace that is very ordinary but used to be very rare. At that stage, men start to move to a different place in your mind. If before a man was like the oxygen mask on a plane without him, I can't breathe, now he is more like a piece of furniture. Important if it's useful, beautiful if it fits, but never again the thing that keeps you alive. This does not make you hate men. It just means you stop breathing through someone else's lungs. And when men fall from the position of oxygen down to optional addition, the tone of every conversation changes. You no longer negotiate from hunger, but from fullness. You stop asking, how do I get him to choose me, and start asking, does his presence disturb the peace I've built? That is why many men feel that women who have lived alone long enough are picky or don't need anyone anymore. In reality, they may still want a relationship, still want a companion, but the price they are willing to pay is different now. They will not pay with their peace. They will not pay with the home they worked their entire lives to have. They will not pay by going back into the role of housekeeper, caregiver, bill payer for a grown man who wants to be treated like a child. That is the first shift from I need a man to survive to I can choose a man if he makes my life better, not smaller. And once that piece drops into place, the other 2 shifts start to appear very clearly. The second shift that happens when you've lived alone long enough is that you stop falling in love with a man's potential and start looking directly at the reality in front of you. When you are lonely, when you still believe you need a man for your life to be whole, it is very easy to fall in love with who he could become. He could be gentler if he heals. He could be less angry if he has less stress. He could be faithful if he understands your pain. You are not dating the man he is today. You are dating the story you write in your head about who he might be tomorrow. But once you have had enough time living alone, your nervous system begins to do something very important. It resets to normal. You know what it's like to wake up in a home with no shouting. You know what it's like to go to bed without having to read someone else's mood. You know what an ordinary day without drama, without cold wars, without criticism looks like. And from then on, every time a new man enters your life, your body becomes a very honest measuring device. After a call with him, do you feel lighter or heavier? After a date, do you sleep well or toss and turn? When your phone lights up with his name, do your shoulders drop or tighten on their own? The woman you used to be would defend him. He's probably just busy. Maybe I'm too sensitive. He's been through a lot. But the woman who has lived alone long enough no longer argues with her own body. She starts to believe the headaches that appear out of nowhere after certain conversations. She begins to pay attention to how she feels after being around him, not just to the words he says while he's there. This is when a crucial truth takes shape. I no longer love the man he could become. I only care about this if nothing changes. Can I live with who he is in reality or not? And to see this shift so clearly, you can never unsee it again. We need to look at it through a very concrete story. Imagine a woman named Anna, 69 years old. She left a long marriage after many years of feeling more like a housekeeper, a nurse, and a wallet than a partner. She lives alone in a small, quiet house. The first years are hard, but then one day she realizes for the first time in decades this house truly belongs to her. She chooses when she eats and when she sleeps. She decides what objects stay in the house and who does not come back. She pays the bills with her own money, and she does not have to explain a single cent to anyone. After 4 years like that, her nervous system gets used to the absence of chaos. Then a man appears. He is pleasant to talk to with childhood wounds that sound very deep. He says past women were not patient enough, not understanding enough, that he just needs a good woman by his side to change. Anna, with a soft heart that has believed such stories before, decides to give him a chance. At first, everything looks fine. He pays for a few dinners, texts her every night, says lovely things about growth, responsibility, and healing. But slowly, small details start to show. He spends more and more time at her house, but rarely takes initiative to cook or clean. He drops half jokes about combining finances for convenience, two old people living together to cut costs. He begins to expect her to take on much of the daily load, cooking laundry, reminding him about his pills, as if she has naturally become his nurse. On the surface, he is still the man with great potential who just needs the right woman. But underneath, Anna's body starts remembering something very old, sleepless nights when nothing big has happened. The feeling of reading someone else's moods to prepare the house and the meals. The quiet fear that if he moves in this house and the savings she built over a lifetime will no longer truly be hers. One evening after he leaves, she is standing alone in the kitchen, hands still wet from washing dishes, when a very clear question rises in her mind. Is my body more at peace when this house is empty, or when he is here? The answer comes quickly without much thinking. She breathes deeper when he is gone. She sleeps better on nights when it is just her. The house truly feels like home, only when there isn't a grown man being treated like a giant child she has to care for. That is the moment she realizes she no longer loves the version he might one day become. She only cares about this. If nothing changes, this is who he is. Can I live with this reality for long? The answer is no. So this time, instead of staying a few more years trying to help him become better, she chooses to end it early. She keeps the house. She keeps her money. She keeps the nervous system that took 4 years to calm down. Anna's story is not a story about hating men. It is the story of a woman who has lived alone long enough that she will no longer betray her own body just because she is afraid of being lonely. And that is the second shift from dating a story about a man's potential to looking very soberly at what his current reality does to your peace, your home, your money, and your nervous system. When these first two shifts have happened, men are no longer oxygen, and potential is no longer enough to keep you. The third shift is almost inevitable. You stop treating men as the final judge of your worth. Earlier in life or in old relationships, you may have measured yourself through a man's eyes. Does he still find me attractive? Does he choose me or someone else? Is he willing to put a label on this to commit? His attention felt like a certificate. I still have value. I am still desirable. But after years of living alone, after rebuilding yourself from emotional rubble more than once, a different voice starts to grow. It is not the voice of bitterness. It is the voice of self-respect, finally finding its volume. I will no longer apply for the role of worthy woman in anyone's play. Instead, you start interviewing men for a completely different role. Are you a safe presence in a life that is already meaningful without you? Your question shifts from, does he like me, to, do I like who I become around him? You start noticing, do I laugh more or less around this person? How much truth can I speak and how much do I have to hold back? Do I feel calm or like I'm walking on eggshells? When we disagree, am I heard or made to feel too sensitive? Most importantly is my inner voice, the part of me that knows very clearly whether I am okay or not respected in this relationship. This is when you stop asking, does he choose me, and start asking, does this relationship protect my peace, my safety, and my dignity? Once this shift is complete, many things that used to impress you, nice cars, pretty words, big promises start to lose their power. They can no longer blind you to emotional immaturity, laziness in action, or a lack of respect for your boundaries. You have lived through too much. You have rebuilt yourself from too many emotional ruins. At this stage, you do not need the world to confirm that you are still attractive, still chosen. You need something much simpler, yet far more precious. I need to be at peace to be respected and to be myself, even if there is not a single man in the room. At this point, we have all three shifts. Men are no longer oxygen. Potential is no longer enough only reality and how your body feels. And men are no longer the ultimate judge of your worth. Your inner voice is. And when these three pieces click together, the way you see men and yourself changes for good. When you put these three shifts together, the way you see men and the way you see yourself changes forever. Men are no longer oxygen. You no longer sign contracts with the version of him he might be tomorrow, while your body is screaming today that you are not okay. And you no longer hand over the keys to your worth to anyone's attention or choice. From here on, every relationship that enters your life has to pass one very simple but very serious question. Does this relationship protect my peace, my safety, and my dignity? For some women, that honest answer leads them to a very clear choice: I am happiest living alone. I do not need and do not want any man in this house, not because they hate men, but because they have made peace with their own life, their own home, and themselves. For others, these three shifts open a different possibility. I still want Quelcun a companion, but I will not trade my peace and my freedom to have him. That might look like this: if a man comes into your life, he is a companion, not a husband in the old sense. He keeps his home, you keep yours. Your money stays yours, his stays his. Your schedules are separate. And if his presence starts to bite into your peace, you know exactly who will leave, and it will not be you. That is when the sentence I choose, connection, not escape, becomes a way of life. Not just a pretty quote. You stop using men as an escape hatch from loneliness, pressure, or fear. You build a life you genuinely want to wake up to every morning, and if someone is invited in, it is because their presence respects the life you have built, not because you need them to feel enough. If, as you hear these words, parts of your own story are rising to the surface, that is not because you are weak. A weak woman does not sit alone, night after night, choosing peace over familiar chaos. Only someone who has grown very strong in silence can do that. And the rest of your life deserves to be built on that strength, whether or not there is any man in the frame.